What if I told you that America found a way to print money forever, and almost nobody knows how they pulled it off? Not a conspiracy theory, not a Reddit thread, a real deal, struck in secret between the United States government and the Saudi royal family in 1974. A deal so important that when Bloomberg News filed a Freedom of Information Act request to find out what was actually in it, the government kept it classified for over 40 years. This is the story of the petrodollar, the hidden financial architecture that has funded American power for 50 years, and the reason why every time a world leader has tried to break it, things have gotten very ugly, very fast. Follow the money. Let's go. To understand the deal, you need to understand what America broke right before it was made. Since the end of World War II, the global financial system ran on something called Bretton Woods. Simple version: every major currency in the world was pegged to the US dollar, and the US dollar was backed by gold. America held the gold. The world held dollars. It worked. Until it didn't. By the late 1960s, America had been spending recklessly, funding the Vietnam War, expanding government programs, printing money it didn't have. Foreign governments started getting nervous. They started doing something the system technically allowed them to do. They started converting their dollars back into gold. On August 15, 1971, President Nixon went on national television and did something that shocked the world. He ended the convertibility of the dollar to gold. Just like that. The system that had governed global finance since 1944 was gone. Now, America had a massive problem. If the dollar wasn't backed by gold, why would anyone want dollars? Why would any country hold US currency? The entire foundation of American financial power had just been ripped out. Nixon needed a replacement. Fast. And Henry Kissinger, arguably the most ruthless strategic mind in American political history, had an idea. The Arab-Israeli war has just ended. OPEC, the oil cartel led by Saudi Arabia, has just imposed an oil embargo on the United States in retaliation for supporting Israel. Gas lines are stretching around city blocks. The American economy is being strangled. And Kissinger sees an opportunity inside the crisis. The meetings that followed happened quietly. Kissinger, Treasury Secretary William Simon, and Saudi Prince Fahd. What they hammered out would reshape global finance for the next half-century. The terms, as documented in declassified records and a 2016 Bloomberg investigation, think about what that means for a second. Every country on Earth needs oil to function. Factories, transport, electricity, all of it runs on oil. And now, to buy oil, you need US dollars first. Overnight, America had replaced gold with oil. The dollar wasn't backed by a shiny metal sitting in a vault anymore. It was backed by the one thing every economy on the planet desperately needed every single day. Kissinger had a name for what happened next. He called it petrodollar recycling. Saudi Arabia and OPEC collect billions in oil revenue, in dollars. They can't spend all of it domestically. So where does it go? Back into US Treasury bonds. Back into the American financial system. Funding American debt. Keeping US interest rates low. Allowing Washington to spend money it doesn't have, essentially forever. By 1975, every single OPEC nation had agreed to the system. America had just invented a money printer, and it was disguised as an oil contract. Now here's where it gets dark, because this system only works if everyone plays along, and over the decades, several world leaders decided they didn't want to play along anymore. Saddam Hussein, Iraq, 2000. Saddam announced that Iraq would stop selling oil in dollars and switch to euros instead. He called it a political statement against American imperialism. In November 2000, Iraq officially made the switch. 3 years later, the United States invaded Iraq. Now, was the Iraq War about petrodollars? Officially, no. Officially, it was about weapons of mass destruction that turned out not to exist. But here's what's documented. One of the first things U.S. forces secured after entering Baghdad was the Iraqi oil ministry. Not the hospitals, not the museums, not the weapons storage sites, the oil ministry. And shortly after the invasion, Iraq's oil sales switched back to dollars. Muammar Gaddafi, Libya, 2009. Gaddafi went further. He proposed an African gold currency, the gold dinar, that African and Arab nations could use to sell oil, bypassing the dollar entirely. He pitched it to the African Union. Several countries were interested. In 2011, a NATO-led coalition, spearheaded by the United States, France, and the UK, launched a military intervention in Libya. Gaddafi was removed from power and killed. Declassified French intelligence memos, released years later, listed Gaddafi's gold dinar plan as one of the primary motivations for French involvement in the intervention. The pattern is hard to ignore. Every major leader who has publicly threatened to move oil sales away from the dollar has ended up either invaded, sanctioned into economic collapse, or removed from power. Iraq, Libya, Venezuela, Iran. Follow the money. For 50 years, the petrodollar looked untouchable. Then something started shifting. In June 2024, just last year, the 50-year cooperation agreement between the United States and Saudi Arabia quietly expired. Saudi Arabia chose not to renew it. For the first time since 1974, Saudi Arabia announced it was open to selling oil in currencies other than the dollar, including the Chinese yuan, the euro, and the Indian rupee. And it's not just Saudi Arabia. In 2023, China and Saudi Arabia completed their first ever yuan-denominated oil transaction. Russia now conducts over 90% of its trade with China in yuan and rubles, completely bypassing the dollar. Brazil and China signed a yuan-based trade settlement agreement. India is buying Russian oil in rupees. Meanwhile, central banks around the world are doing something they haven't done at this pace since World War I. They're buying gold, aggressively. China has cut its holdings of U.S. Treasury bonds from $1.3 trillion in 2013 down to just $682 billion by late 2025. Russia, Turkey, Poland, India, all systematically reducing dollar reserves and replacing them with gold. The architecture Kissinger built in 1974 is not collapsing overnight. The dollar still dominates, accounting for around 56% of global reserves. There's no obvious replacement. The Chinese yuan has deep structural problems as a reserve currency. But here's the thing about financial systems. They don't collapse suddenly. They erode slowly, and then all at once. So why does any of this matter to you? Because the petrodollar system is the reason America can run a $34 trillion national debt without facing the same consequences that would destroy any other country. When you're the world's reserve currency, when everyone has to buy your money to buy oil, you can borrow essentially without limit. The rest of the world absorbs your inflation. They hold your debt. They fund your government. If that changes, if the dollar loses its stranglehold on oil trade, America can no longer export its inflation to the rest of the world. It comes home instead. Higher prices, higher interest rates, higher costs on everything that gets imported, which is most of what you buy. This isn't guaranteed to happen tomorrow. The dollar is still dominant. The system still functions. But 50 years ago, nobody thought the Bretton Woods gold standard would collapse either. Until Nixon went on TV one Tuesday night and ended it in a 15-minute address. Systems that look permanent rarely are. And the people who see the cracks before everyone else, who understand what's actually backing the money in their wallet, are always better positioned for what comes next. That's why you're here, and that's why this channel exists. Every week on the Paper Trail, we follow the money to places most people never look. Subscribe so you don't miss it. The trail doesn't end here.